3 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon, already the final day of April 2024. Alongside Elijah Campbell, I'm Jay Phillips. Welcome into the postgame show. Had fun talking about beer for a couple of minutes there. You want to keep doing that?
I like beer.
I'm here.
I drank beer last night.
Here to talk beer. Good.
Had me a pernicious last night.
There you go.
On draft.
There you go. Fine choice from our friends at Wicked Weed and the AVL. But no, we got a lot to get to today. Baseball-wise, we'll talk with our good friend Derek Scott. Carolina back in action tomorrow against the ETSU Buccaneers.
There you go.
And Mike Yuva will join us before that. Mike coming up bottom of the hour to talk Carolina football. We'll get into his thoughts on the post-spring. We don't really have a depth chart, do we?
No, nothing official. I think all depth charts are we considered unofficial depth charts. We can make our own depth charts.
Yeah. I don't even know if we should do that yet. I don't know. And I think that's kind of what we want to talk about with Mike. You and I will get into a few of our own thoughts on Carolina football here in just a second. And we'll talk to him. Again, Derek's coming up for you. By the way, speaking of football, our very good friend, just looking ahead real quick to let you all know, appointment listening and all that, tomorrow afternoon at 3:30, our very good friend Josh Kendall on the beat now for the Athletic, covering the Atlanta Falcons. Of course, a longtime beat writer here in Columbia covering Carolina. Still keeps his finger on the pulse of the Southeastern Conference as well. But Josh will join us tomorrow. By then, maybe we have even more clarity on why the Atlanta Falcons chose Michael Penix with the 8th pick of the first round.
It's a good thing we have our friend Josh on, because surely the team that he covers didn't do anything stupid over the last week.
Look, as a few more days have passed, and I watched Dan Patrick talk with Rick Neuheisel about this, and I think Rick said, yeah, I'd have gotten Rome Odunze right there because he was there. I'd have gotten my veteran quarterback that I'm bringing in to win now another weapon, because they've got a few nice pieces. They do.
Offensively.
They do.
I mean, that's when you draft in the top 10 the last 4 years, at 8 specifically, you can acquire some really good talent.
I like Pitts. I like Robinson. They've got some pieces, and another one would have been good there. And they did get another pretty good tight end, but they maybe didn't get one of these, elite receivers in what's deemed to be one of the best receiver classes
ever.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, let's talk about it again in 5 years and see. Hopefully all these guys make it. You figure at least one or two of them probably won't. But
this might be the highest percentage of a hit rate you'll get on receivers. I know that rate's pretty low, but I think this is the year you maybe can see 70% of these guys getting second contracts with that team.
Hope so.
I can see it.
But anyway, we'll talk with Josh. I get it. That you've got Cousins, who is very good. Honestly, I don't know where, for anybody that does any of these official, rankings or anything with the analytics, where Cousins ranks right now. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football. Burrow, Herbert, Allen. Tua's okay.
Interesting about Cousins is coming off an Achilles tear, too.
Yeah, so there's
exactly
that.
How he looks coming out, it's going to be important.
There's that. But anyway, we'll talk to Josh tomorrow. Looking forward to that. And, we'll get into a few SEC things as well. Elijah's upset because he had a nice opportunity with the Braves-Mariners game last night, but didn't get what you were looking for.
No. When you play category fantasy baseball, sometimes, 10 strikeouts and 1 walk from a starting pitcher is good. But when wins are one of the categories you're judged by, and you have to, beat your opponent in, sometimes a night like Bobby Miller's, I don't want to say it's completely wasted, again, because one of the categories is, ERA and whip and strikeouts, which Bobby Miller did a pretty good job of not allowing Bryce Miller did a pretty good job of not allowing the Braves to do any of that and striking out a lot of batters, 10 to be exact, but didn't get credit for the win. So I'm a little hacked off about that. A little bit. It would have been a perfect night for him otherwise.
How old is he? He was at A&M 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Does that sound right?
And last year was his official rookie season.
Okay. So maybe even, I don't remember. He was a good SEC pitcher.
Yeah, long, lanky, got a good, really good fastball pitcher. Very good modern pitcher.
But, and the Braves, kind of waste a nice night from Max Fried. But
There was a lot of wasting in that game in terms of certain statistical.
Try to go do it again in Seattle. Also last night, Jamal Murray, who's been a little banged up, did hit a game winner, eliminating the L.A. Lakers in the process. Nuggets move on.
Brutal.
You know, we've talked. I mean, we don't talk a lot of NBA on this program, really on this radio station, because there's just not a lot of interest in the NBA collectively in this community. I think there's plenty of you that like the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
I like the NBA. I don't follow it like I used to. I was telling Elijah yesterday, we were talking off air. Back in the 80s and maybe even into the early to mid 90s, I could probably tell you. Not all of them, right? But I could tell you a lot of starting fives and some bench players. I mean, especially in the 80s. I was an NBA fan.
You're into it.
You know, and honestly, one of the reasons why, same thing with the Braves, the Hawks were on TBS all the time. So in addition to what was on CBS on the weekends or whatever with Dick Stockton and those guys, and obviously Magic and Bird and then Jordan, you know, they were always on TV, Dr. J, Moses. You know, I mean, Dominique and the Hawks were on all the time. So you saw a lot of these teams just on a regular basis and through just like any other thing, you know, through some type of sports fan osmosis, you begin to learn a lot about the NBA back in the day. These days, I could not. But I get there's a lot of fans that still enjoy it. And when the playoffs are here, you know, playoff basketball is fun. Like playoff hockey is fun. I mean, the playoffs, that's, you know, it's a good time. But for LeBron and the Lakers right now, it's just been a weird experiment. And you think back to we were talking about Phoenix yesterday, and you've got, you know, three guys that literally combine to make $150 million, and you were swept out of the playoffs. It's one thing to lose in the playoffs, but my God, try to win a couple of games.
Be competitive in more than two of them.
Yeah,
please.
I mean, it was just embarrassing. But LeBron has. And I guess I mean this in a good way because I'm a huge fan of what LeBron James has done for basketball. Mm-hmm. And he's an amazing, amazing talent. But he's been allowed to be sort of the de facto GM of the Lakers, too, and try to assemble people around him that he has believed will fit with how he wants to play. And LeBron, you know, some people don't ever really want to stop and think about it. LeBron's a very unselfish player. He wants to get people involved. He knows how to pass. Yes, he can score sometimes at will, maybe not like he once did. He doesn't mind defending, which some superstars are like, well, I'll just take a night off on defense. LeBron plays, you know, end to end, and LeBron likes to play 40 minutes a night. Mm-hmm. How he does it, I don't know. He's a machine. But it hasn't worked. I mean, yes. And I look, everybody played by the same rules. They won the COVID title. So that counts. I'm not here to dog it.
Hard one to win.
Yeah, I'm not here to dog it. They won the COVID title. And they won this year's in-season tournament with, you know, I know the NBA wants that to be a thing. And so they won that. So but let's face it, man, that team should be more competitive. They need to be playing in the Western Conference Finals at least, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
And they're not gonna. And now what? You know, LeBron's 36, 37?
39. He'll be 40 next year.
Oh my God. I was thinking he was like 37. Okay. Well, that makes it even harder then. And they're talking about, you know, well, he wants to play with Bronny. And that's cool. That's a nice want. And if Bronny were if I can liken this to when Ken Griffey Jr. got to play with his dad. Now, again, Ken Sr. was a fantastic baseball player for like 20 years. He's no LeBron.
Right.
But he played in the major leagues a long time. His son became the megastar.
A prodigy. He's a prodigy.
Absolutely. I mean, he got to the bigs at 19. Bronny James is not that. And that's unfortunate for Bronny James because it's being put on his shoulders artificially. His dad hasn't done it. I think LeBron has done his best not to shield Bronny, but to at least provide an environment where he can more organically become a good player. As hard as that is in this
or even just an adult.
Yeah, I was saying in this era especially. Because you and I were talking about Michael Jordan's kid when he went to UCF, and he's like, well, he's not as good as his dad. Well, no bleep, Sherlock.
How many people on the planet are?
None. You know, none. And how many people are as good as LeBron? None.
Yeah.
You know?
Generational is not
Right.
Shouldn't be used loosely.
Right.
And LeBron's generational.
So, and people are talking about, well, what if like Orlando or Atlanta drafted Bronny? Is LeBron going to go there? No, he's not. LeBron wants to, if LeBron's going to keep playing, he wants to play in a place where there's at least an opportunity to win one more NBA championship. Mm-hmm. But honestly, Elijah, and you know the league these days better than I don't think that's in L.A., at least not with the Lakers. That other L.A. team is pretty good, although I worry about them.
I was going to say, there's some ghosts for that franchise that haunt them on a frequent basis.
I'm like, well, Paul George will play pretty well. Oh, yeah, they do have Harden and Kawhi. As long as Kawhi's knee feels good that night. But anyway.
35 games a year.
Yeah. And it's just, and like AD.
Yeah.
AD's going to give you 60.
He played over 70 games this year, and that's the most he's ever played in his career. He's been in the league for about a decade.
Yeah. So I don't know what happens next for LeBron James.
Yeah. And that's the thing with the Lakers, too, is you had a team this year that at its peak is really good. And even in this playoff series, I mean, they led for like 65% of the minutes. They just couldn't close out games.
Well, that game the other night.
They led almost the entire time.
And by as many as, 20, 24
game
or whatever?
They led by 20.
20? Yeah.
And then it dwindled away. They didn't have much of a bench. And in today's NBA, you got to have good role players. Role players win you titles. And, the super teams are sexy, right? You look at the Phoenix Suns, you're like, oh, wow. They have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. Oh, that's so cool. They should win every game. Oh, well, they don't have anybody off the bench. Josh Okogie's the third guy off the bench. He plays maybe 7 minutes a game. Maybe gets in the game. You need to have some depth. You need to have guys who are going to be in there.
And see, you're doing what Pearson used to do. You're just making up names now. That's not. You don't know that that's a real guy. You're just.
I want to start dropping some I'm making up some names and seeing if you can pick up which ones are real. Okay. We need to do a segment.
Well, I always
Is
tell the
this
story
real or fake NBA player.
When Kawhi was in Toronto, and he said, "Well, Pascal Siakam's pretty good." I was like, "You're just making up
like,
sounds, man.
Real.
That's just sounds. Like, stop it. Give me a real player."
I want to make a list. We're gonna make that a segment eventually. Real or fake NBA player, and you have to guess. I will read 5 names, and you'll have to guess.
I'm here for it. But I might go over every day.
But those nameless NBA players, the role players, are what win you titles. And that's the thing with the Lakers now is they have 2 guys that take up a majority of the salary cap, and they did a good job of landing someone like Austin Reeves, who is going to be is a little more
That's
on the
real
cheaper
player.
side. Real player. Good job.
Thank you.
Very good.
Huh?
Very good.
Do that one.
And to be able to at least contribute and be able to get you to this point, but you got to have those guys to get you over the edge, and you got to be able to have those guys be engaged for 82 games. Regular season matters. I know people that are in NBA circles don't like talking about regular season results, or they diminish a lot of results as, oh, it's just the regular season. But you know what happens if they were like 4 games better this year? They're a 5 seed or a 4 seed. They don't see Denver until potentially the Western Conference final.
Right.
Or Oklahoma City, because I don't know if we saw what Oklahoma City did. They swept the Pelicans, and only one of those games were remotely competitive. That team might be young and full of like dudes that are barely old enough to drink, but they're damn good, man. That team can win a title right now, despite their youth. You wouldn't see either of those teams potentially.
Does Zion have to stay in New Orleans, by the way? I know he signed another contract, but can they trade him? Can something happen?
Well, where else can he eat all that gumbo?
Oh, man, they can ship it.
They'll just ship it.
Yeah.
There's
plenty of boxes and coolers and dry ice.
They have a Brandon Ingram problem. That's more their issue.
Well, I just want to see him play somewhere where it's going to matter, but we'll see. But here's pulling for LeBron, man. But I don't know if he's going to get to play with Bronny, because Bronny's not ready for the NBA.
No.
And he won't be ready next season.
He'll be a project. Yeah.
I mean, maybe the G League if he doesn't go to college again, but I don't see LeBron playing in Des Moines or wherever they have G League teams.
The Maine Red Claws, which I guess are now the Maine Celtics, but the artist formerly known as the Maine Red Claws. Yeah. LeBron ain't walking through that door.
No. Yeah. Not at this point in time. All right, come back on the other side. Talk a little Carolina spring football, a little bit of post-draft coverage as well. And in about 15 minutes or so, our buddy Mike Yuva will join in on that conversation. You are listening to the Tuesday postgame show. I'm going to tell you about the men's clinic and Dr. Dan Balknight. I've been talking about them on this radio station for a long time. Dan is a fantastic person, a fantastic doctor, his staff ready to take care of you. And guys, one of the things that we all struggle with is admitting that we don't feel good. Whether we just feel, a little blah or whether something hurts and something is wrong. And a lot of times, guys, when it comes to masculinity, it'll fix itself, or I'm going to tough it all out. And men are more likely to skip routine checkups. They'll delay real medical care and consultation, or they're just uncomfortable talking about it. At the men's clinic, you don't have to worry about those things. Dan gets you. He understands what's going on. And he's been doing this a long time. Don't be afraid to go to the doctor. Don't be afraid to see what's up, and don't be afraid to feel back to getting like you want to feel. 803-875-MENS. That's the Men's Clinic and Dr. Dan Balknight. Twenty minutes after 3 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. Welcome back in. It's the Postgame Show. Jay Phillips and Elijah Campbell with you in the Herndon Chevy Studios, downtown Columbia. Our buddy Mike Yuba coming up in just a little bit to talk more Carolina football. Amarian Brown, Gamecock receiver, has signed a free agent deal with Cleveland. Tyreek Johnson, defensive end, has signed with the New York Jets as an undrafted free agent. Mike also reporting that DeCarrion Joyner and Jordan Strawn have a couple of different camp invites. So we'll talk with him in more detail about that. One other thing on the Spencer Rattler story, which continues, I think, to become one that's kind of national. And, Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network maybe threw some gasoline on a fire during the draft when on Saturday he said, hey, a lot of people just didn't like the way that Spencer Rattler portrayed himself, or came across in that high school documentary, which was 5 or 6 years ago now. And look, there might be some truth to that. But now Adam Schefter of ESPN is basically saying, nah, here's the deal. The Broncos and the Falcons really liked him a lot. And they were really thinking about taking him. And then they talked more, and obviously both took first-round quarterbacks. So they weren't going to take another rookie quarterback because they both had brought people in. The Falcons obviously had brought in their starter. The Broncos haven't done that. I think, and I am a Broncos fan, as most of you who listen to me routinely know. They didn't bring Zach Wilson in to start, which means if Zach Wilson ends up becoming the starter, that's not the way it was supposed to go. I think that Sean Payton is going to do everything he can in the next, 4 months to turn Bo Nix into the starting quarterback of the Denver Broncos. I'd rather you not. I see the look on Elijah's face. I'd rather you not ask me how that makes me feel as a Broncos fan. I'm not saying he's going to be a bust.
You're not excited.
I just don't know if he's ready to be a starter in the National Football League. The one thing I like about, if there's one
he's
thing
like 40 years old, so if he's not ready now,
sure.
He'll never be.
The one thing I like about the Penix deal, or pick, I should say, is that he's going to sit. And you and I have only been working together for about half a year now, but for years. Yours truly has been saying, listen, the pressure that's on some of these quarterbacks that go high, and the team sucks. Bryce Young of late, amongst others. David Carr, God bless him, who just, man.
Rest in peace. He's not dead, but his soul left his body on that football field.
It did.
68 times his rookie year.
It's somewhere in the Texas Channel. It just faded its way out, man. It's underneath one of those big old oil tankers.
Buried in Reliance Stadium.
It's never coming back. Penix is going to sit. I love the fact that, a few years ago when Kansas City, made the Mahomes pick, I guess he was middle of the first, right? Where was he picked?
He was picked 10th.
10th. Okay, I was thinking like 15, but anyway, but he sat. Look at him now.
For a year.
I'm not saying that if he had played as a rookie, he wouldn't become what he's become, but I do believe, and I think his head coach believes, that having him sit for a year and just learn about living every day in the NFL is so much better for you. All the things that are so different. I just don't think Nix is ready. But anyway, let's come back around to Spencer. Schefter is saying, no, listen. I mean, maybe some, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, no, that the high school thing is different. No, and we saw the grades. The grade on Spencer Rattler was third round. Mm-hmm. They take into account some form of how you interact with people. But the 90+% of it is, how do you play football? And how do you project to play football at the highest level? And the projection was, you'll be a third-round pick, and that we think you can play in this league for a while. It just so happened, again, as Adam says, that maybe the teams most interested in him no longer needed him, and teams had other needs. Everybody always wants a better quarterback. But if you're not one of those, then it's like, all right, well, We'll see what happens.
And the run on quarterbacks did happen at a certain time to where there's not as much desperation. Look, the Saints draft him to be a backup to sit behind Derek Carr.
Yeah.
Because there's a good chance that Derek Carr isn't the quarterback in 2025. Right? And at that point, that's only a year ahead. So with his age and everything, that maybe that can work. And if clearly, I don't think the Saints will be drafting in the top 10 next season. There's a chance that they can. But if you do, then look, it's not a huge risk or investment. You stink it up with Derek Carr this year. You have his contract expires at the end of 2025. There's a way to move on and still draft his successor after him. But if something happens to Derek Carr this year, Spencer Rattler is a guy that can come in and maybe give you some quality snaps. And at that point, that's the kind of quarterback you're trying to get in rounds 3 through 5. But the desperation for that guy might not be, eye-popping, right? Or like you need to trade up to get him because no one else shares that same need.
Speaking of my Broncos, by the way, as I mentioned yesterday, I'm very happy for Nick Gargiulo. I do like him, and
he's a Bronco.
And talking with people about him, again, a guy who can play each of the interior line spots, both guard spots and the center spot. Again, smart, heady kid, hard worker. There's a lot to like there, so hopefully he catches on. But I'm pulling for Spencer, and here's what bothers me. And like I said to you yesterday, to all of you listening, I'm not here. Spencer Rattler doesn't need us in Columbia to defend him or his folks back home in Phoenix to defend him or whatever else. He's a grown man now, and he's made his, he's going to make some money. But what sucks, in my opinion, and I don't want to blame Ian Rappaport alone, but he's a big deal on the league-owned network
that a lot of people watch.
Yeah. And like I said, he threw gas on that fire. And so now Spencer, maybe for the second time and at a much higher level and higher profile spot, has to overcome that. And that's just unfortunate. I'm not going to go, oh, poor Spencer. Like, I'm not doing that either.
Right.
Because again, he's a grown man.
I'm annoyed for him.
But yeah, but it is. It's like
annoying.
It's like, dude, that's not really. I mean, okay, so a couple of people told you that. Okay. But that doesn't mean that the whole league felt that way. So it was nice to sort of see Schefter, who, is a big deal in terms of covering the league as well, come out and say some of those things. But we'll see how it goes for Spencer. All right. Come back on the other side of the break. We'll stay with Gamecock football. Our buddy Mike Yuva, covering all things Gamecocks for Gamecock Central, will join us to talk about the draft, his thoughts on the Gamecock spring, maybe a few other things too. You are listening to the Postgame Show. Hey, homeowners looking to make a few improvements around the house, been into place for a while, got some equity built up, but you also got, family equity that needs to maybe grow a little bit as well. Well, it's time for you to call Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union. Take advantage of that equity and take advantage of their fantastic rates on home equity lines of credit. Unlock your equity and then access that line of credit over a 10-year draw period to assist you with all your goals and needs around the house. Extra room for you and the kids, update the kitchen, maybe redo the basement for some kind of fun family room. You'll pay lower closing costs, lower application fees than you do with the big banks, and you're doing it all locally with Palmetto Citizens. They've been helping folks out here for more than 80 years. Apply today online at palmettocitizens.org or inside any of their 14 convenient Midlands locations. My wife and I are customers. We love working with Palmetto Citizens. Continue talking some Carolina football on this Tuesday. Jay and Elijah with you, and our good friend Mike Yuva of Gamecock Central going to hang out with us here. We were just talking about Spencer Rattler. Had an interesting question off air from a listener about Spencer. We'll get into some of that for you in a bit, and a few other things going on around the draft and spring football as Mike joins us now. And Mike and I were talking this morning. This is strictly as fans. And people that cover the Gamecocks, we're kind of excited. Mike is a Patriots fan. Marcellus Dial headed there. I'm a Bronco fan. Nick Gargiulo headed there. So, Mr. Yuva, we each got somebody to pull for on our team. I don't know how much it's going to help next season, but I'm here to cheer.
I know, and as I told you, and it'll probably piss off some of the listeners, but Patriots got a Gamecock and a half if you want to count Bell. I'm not necessarily too crazy about that pick, but I do like the Dial pick because I think he can bring a lot of versatility to a Patriots secondary that's certainly looking for some depth, and I think he can make a difference on special teams like we saw him do at South Carolina.
Yeah. And Elijah does remind me, as he said, that really all three of us, because, again, Spencer Rattler is a Saint, and that's Elijah's team. So
that's a clean sweep on this show.
We did for only 4 dudes getting picked, and there's plenty of Panther fans. So really, the rest of you are like, I don't know why the hell y'all pull for those teams. But the locals are pulling for the Panthers. At least if you're local and under 35 years old, then you're probably definitely a Panther fan. But anyway, we'll see how that one goes. Mike, real quick, you covered the NFL for a while in your career too, so you know the league. I don't want to. You know what? I was going to ask you a question that's too leading. Your thoughts on how Spencer Rattler was portrayed this weekend with what Ian Rappaport said, and then maybe the follow-ups to clean things up a little bit with what Adam Schefter said. Truth in the middle somewhere?
So I said this a couple times on Gamecock Central, and I may have said this on social media a little bit, and I thought it was perfect because I'm out in Arizona at a wedding, and I bring that up because there's people that don't pay attention to South Carolina. So they're just, they're college football fans, but they don't know what's going on in Columbia. And I think that is a perfect representation of what we saw this week with some of the things that were being said about Rattler during the draft. And what I mean by that is, unless you've been paying attention to South Carolina and paying attention to Columbia, if you're a college football fan, maybe, okay, he played for the Gamecocks. You hear these reports, and instantly you probably think, all right, that has to be true. Oh, yeah, I remember he was on that show. So to me, what it tells me is it's easy for people who aren't paying attention and who haven't been paying attention to what Rattler has been like over the last 2 seasons in South Carolina, because I can tell you from any interaction I ever had with him, on top of the things that I would do my due diligence, and I've shared this before, when there's players that come here and there's just this notion that there could be some type of issues with them from a character standpoint, I'll always do my homework. I'll reach out to some of the players on the team after a month or two and say, hey, what can you tell me about this player? And with Rattler, when he got there were some players that said, I'm a little worried. Well, those same players 2 months in, 3 months in said, he's probably the best teammate we've ever had. I can't believe that I even had this notion that he had any character issues. So I bring that all up to say, I think it was one of those low-hanging fruit things that you could say, and anyone would believe it outside of Columbia because they haven't been paying attention to the man that we saw for the last 2 years, someone that, again, would always fall on the sword after games, even if he had a great game, because he always wanted to protect his teammates. That's the Spencer Rattler that I know, and not this character portrayal of someone from high school over 5 years ago.
Yeah. That's well said. Yeah, Elijah and I said kindly, it's convenient, and to be more blunt, it was lazy.
Yeah, lazy. And I may have had, I didn't accuse any team of stock tanking, but you know how these NFL GMs work. They're gonna tell someone like Ian Rappaport something that they'll say on TV in hopes of maybe somebody who wouldn't fall to them normally would fall to them at a certain spot. Not saying that happened, but I'm saying it does happen in that industry. Mike, would love to ask you about your thoughts on your beloved Boston Bruins have a chance to close out a series tonight against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But we'll keep it Gamecock football related. And there are a couple of guys that didn't get drafted that are going to be joining teams as undrafted free agents. What's the latest on some of them? And are there any good fits that you hear in terms of guys that are going to be playing for a certain team and you think might have a really good chance in training camp to be able to get a roster spot?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is Marion Brown. And if people have been paying attention to Gamecock Central, you would have known this is one because we did an interview with AB leading up to the draft. And a lot of people, I think they started scratching their head when AB shared that he started to hear more from teams, especially special teams coordinators, once this new NFL rule for kickoff came out a couple months back. They said, hey, we're going to change this up. And a lot of teams reached out to AB and said, hey, we think you'd be perfect for that. Now, if you look at it from a statistical standpoint, AB really wasn't this crazy wild returner in comparison to some of maybe the other players out there. But here's what I keep just trying to remind people. When you look at the new kickoff return, it's very similar in my mind to how players who have success as a receiver on a screen or even a running back when they come off a screen because they can see that hole and it's going to close quickly. What do you think of when you think of AB? A guy that can make cuts quick. And if you can make a quick cut on that return, the new style, man, you could really be a difference maker, not only with what you can also do as a receiver. So it didn't surprise me that he got brought in by the Browns. They love him. I was talking to his agent throughout the third round of the draft, and it felt like if he didn't get drafted, they had the numbers in place very quickly. He's receiving $150,000 guaranteed, $20,000 bonus, which tells me for a guy that is going undrafted, they actually like this guy. And in the scheme of things, those numbers might not seem that big, but for a guy undrafted, that's pretty damn good.
Well, and you make the team, and all of a sudden you're looking at some real money for a year, and then you've got a chance to catch on, and that's a good team. I know it seems weird to feel that way, but that Cleveland team is pretty good. It's a very competitive division, obviously, but that is a solid sign. Talking to Mike Uva, Gamecock Central, getting his thoughts post-draft. We'll get into a few post-spring thoughts as well. You've also got a couple of reports out there. Tyreek Johnson is signing with the New York Jets. And then I'm curious what you're hearing as well about Jordan Strawn and DeCarrion Joyner, who you say have gotten invites. Take us through that. I mean, I get what an undrafted free agent's going to do, but invites to camp, are these guys selecting one? Are there in essence tryout opportunities almost? Mike, how's that working?
So I'll go back to Tyreek real quick, having an opportunity to sign as an undrafted free agent with the Jets. I think that's great because there's another Gamecock up there who's now on the coaching staff, Shaq Wilson. And I know that Shaq always loves being able to get some Gamecocks up there. So certainly pay close attention to that because Shaq will do whatever he can to help him out, but certainly Tyreek's going to have to hold his own weight. As far as the camp invites go, the best way to describe it, essentially, it's a tryout. You're trying to be able to make the roster in some shape, way, or form. Here's the beauty of it, though. If you aren't signed, if you're an undrafted free agent, right, it's a little bit different. With this case, guy like DeCarrion Joyner, guy like Jordan Strawn, both had multiple invites to mini camps. For DK, he's going to be working out with the Seattle Seahawks, and then on Sunday, he told me that the Saints also invited him to their mini camp. For a guy like Jordan Strawn, I spoke with him on Sunday. He told me it's the Tennessee Titans, but in addition to that, the Kansas City Chiefs have also invited him to a mini camp. So they're going to have an opportunity to go to both these places. Essentially, you could go to as many tryouts as you want or mini camp invites as you want as long as a team invites you and you're not signed. So basically, it just gives them better odds. I really like the fact that the Saints are bringing in a guy like DK because – what do I think of? Well, I think of a guy like Taysom Hill, and they've been able to find ways to use him in multiple facets. What is DK known for? He's someone that it can be used multiple ways as well. So, personally, I hope they go to their whatever place and they're able to find a way to stick onto a team of those two teams that brought them in. But here's the beauty, too. It opens up eyes to other teams because now you have an opportunity to really impress teams. I know from the past there's been players like a guy like Carlins Patel. He shined at another mini camp, and then scouts talked about what he was able to do there, and then they brought him into the Steelers organization. So that's the other thing, too. You have more eyeballs when you have a chance to work out for multiple teams.
Can we impose upon you to hang over? I want to get into a few spring football thoughts in addition to draft recaps. Got a few more minutes for me?
Oh, yeah, I just have to clean, so this is perfect. The girlfriend will have to hold off for a little. This is great.
All right, good. Well, hey,
you're welcome for the
yeah, I was going to say, man, that's good. If we're helping
I owe you guys
out.
a couple beers for you guys.
We're here for the harmony, if nothing else. All right, he's Mike Uva, Gamecock Central, and we'll talk Gamecock spring football as the postgame show continues. 12 minutes in front of 4 o'clock here on a Tuesday afternoon. Reminds you that our good friend, the voice of the Gamecocks, Derek Scott, coming up at 4:30. We'll talk some Carolina baseball with him. Gamecocks back at it tomorrow night. Time permitting, try to get in a few more thoughts from Derek on what Lamont Paris is doing in the transfer portal and beyond. That's coming up for you in about 45 minutes. But thanks again to Mike Yuva for joining us. We will not talk spring cleaning. Although, what is your favorite go-to cleaner? Are you a Kaboom guy? It's just the classic Windex. Do you use the store brand? Where are we with that?
I don't know. I will say my favorite thing to do cleaning is that I got one of those vacuum cleaners. What are those?
Like the robot?
The robot.
Yeah.
So, the girlfriend will come home and she'll be like, what did you do? I said, I cleaned up today. And she's like, what did you do? I said, I vacuumed.
All right.
So, that's what I do. The cat doesn't like that. She's a cat girl. So
I take credit for running the robot at our house all the time. If my wife asks me, I'll say, hey, the robot ran. She's like, you didn't do that. I was like, I had to move a few things so it could get around better. That counts.
Yeah,
It contributes.
I'm a big fan of how I lived this long without one. So I'm still new to the game when it comes to the robot vacuum.
I strongly recommend the robot vacuum, nearly as strongly as I recommend the tankless water heater for those of you who use a lot of hot water. Anyway, all right, before we get out of here, Mike, let's get into a few spring thoughts. I say this with a smile on my face, or ask it with a smile on my face, but how close is this staff to having a depth chart? I know they don't want one, but I know that we want them to give us one, but I guess what I'm really asking is how much more do we know about this football team's roster and depth right now relative to, say, February 1st?
I wasn't great at math, but if I had to put a number on it, I'd probably say about 75%. I think that's fair to say. And the reason I say that is you look at a lot of the positions, and it's not just the spring game itself. It's going off of some of the things we heard in the spring. And I say heard doesn't necessarily mean what coaches said in front of the podium, but the other 14 practices. So I think a lot of those positions, maybe you could say cemented or pretty much, you could start to put in pen maybe for your two deep. But I also think there's going to be some interesting competition going on in fall camp. And I think the first one that comes to mind to me is the 6 wide receivers that they're looking for in that wideout room. On top of that, I think things got interesting with the way Vakari Swain performed in that spring game, and not just the way he performed in the spring game, but what he also did in the spring. So those two positions in particular, I think Swain is really going to push Judge Collier. I would still give the advantage to Collier across from O.D. Fortune playing the other corner spot, but I think there will be some good competition still in fall.
Yeah, Mike, obviously the Achilles heel last year. I think South Carolina learned this lesson the hard way. You can't win in the SEC without great offensive line depth, and obviously that was the story of the entire season, was the offensive line. What were kind of your observations over the course of spring practices and the coaches you've talked to about how this roster and this group of offensive linemen stack up to last year? Because it was certainly something that was addressed in recruiting and in the transfer portal.
Well, I go back to one thing that Lonnie Teasley told me before spring. He said last year taught him the value of really making sure that you cross-train these guys. And I think one of the things that probably frustrates fans is when they hear the offensive line play, it struggled at times, and they don't want to hear the fact that they dealt with as many injuries as they did in the offensive line. I mean, you play, over a dozen offensive linemen. I mean, you saw what you saw last year. So I think more than anything, I think depth, I think proven talent on the offensive line too. You look at it as maybe a glass half empty situation where you have to play two true freshmen a year ago, and certainly both of those guys, Louis Tosin Babalade and Trevon Bond, they certainly held their own. But now you look at that glass that was maybe half empty a year ago, and you're looking at it now saying, man, that's half full because they have gained that experience. So I think with the offensive line, I think there's a lot of good that we saw in the spring. I would say this, though. I do want to bring this up because I felt bad for Robbie Ashford and some of the offensive linemen that you saw on the black team last week. What's frustrating is I don't think we truly got to see what they could do as a unit because before the game, what happens? Marquis Anderson, his back locks up. And now you have to change up your offensive line, and you lose a starter moments before the game, and you're already dealing with having two separate teams. So I would have liked to have seen what that offense could have done a little bit better. But I also say that because if you're looking at anyone from an individual standpoint on the black team in that spring game, I don't think it's truly fair to say that's what their potential is simply because they were playing musical chairs at the very last moment before the game.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and bang the drum right now, but that's why I want to see a real exhibition game against somebody else, or if nothing else, I don't mind the kitschiness of the players having part of the say of the draft of the teams and things like that, Mike. But give me good on good, give me ones versus ones and then twos versus twos, and let me see what's out there, so that again, not so much for us, but for them. Like, go ahead and play as a unit without the whistle blowing every time to stop and do it again or whatever else. So, but that's a topic for another day. Look, this team isn't really going to be picked to do much. So final thing for you, I got about a minute left here. Is it nice, you think, right now for Shane Beamer and this crew to be flying so far under the radar?
Shoot, think back to their first year here, right? I mean, no one predicted them to be able to even make a bowl game or, come anywhere close to sniffing it. And that's really what got the ball rolling into that second year. So I say that because, and I've said this before too, I think Beamer arrived probably earlier from an expectation standpoint than a lot of people expected him and this staff to be able to do. And I think that's one of the reasons why having the type of season they had last year put a lot of, a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. But I certainly still think that when you look at what they've been able to do from a recruiting standpoint, it's not just from the high school ranks and some of the players that they've been able to accumulate, whether it be on the offensive line, defensive line in particular, but what they were able to do from a transfer portal standpoint this last cycle. It should excite you. It should excite you. I get it. College football is changing a lot. And the transfer portal, NIL, it's turning a lot of people off who have been diehard college football fans. And you don't need some Yankee to tell you that when you've been living down here your whole life. But I'm going on my 10th year of covering this team, and I totally understand the passion that this fan base has. And I can tell you there should be a lot of excitement with this team, not just for this season, but with a lot of the younger players that they've been able to bring in. And, certainly it starts with a guy like Lenora Sellers, but there's a lot of talented guys here.
Yeah. Good stuff as always. Thanks for the extra time. Good luck cleaning. Again, we're here for the harmony, as we said earlier. We'll talk to you real soon. Appreciate you.
Go Bruins.
All right, sounds good.
That's our buddy Mike Uva, Mike_Uva, to follow on Twitter, GamecockCentral.com. More on that NCAA NIL stuff coming up. 4 o'clock on this Tuesday. Welcome back in. Second hour of the postgame show coming at you from the Herndon Chevy Studios in a now rainy downtown Columbia, South Carolina. That's all right. Need a little every now and then.
That's our weather report.
Yeah.
It's raining.
I'm like Ollie. It's raining. Yeah, when I say like we need the rain, Terry always says like, "Well, you got some crops." I'm like, "Nah, man, I got a yard with grass, and I would rather not have to artificially water it."
I do eat crops that other people
That
grow,
too.
so
Yeah,
that's a plus.
it's like Ford's just up there eating ramen and protein bars. He doesn't care.
Living on Cliff Bars
Although they have lots of like whole grain and things in them, and guess what?
requires rain.
That's a crop.
Yep. Rain helps everybody. Rain is a good thing
I agree.
in spurts.
Led Zeppelin wrote a really good song about it.
Trying to think of which one you're alluding to.
The Rain Song.
Is
It's
that- okay,
very,
just the
very,
Rain Song,
very
okay.
simply named, man.
Very simply named. I forget that one exists.
I always, I think back, to the live version of that on Song Remains the Same and how quiet it gets for a second. And then, no pun intended, the thundering drums of John Bonham come back out live and you realize, yep, this is a rock song. It's a good one.
It's a really good one.
Yep.
Speaking of fun fact, I actually bought an album yesterday for the first time in a while. I haven't bought a vinyl record in about a year and a half. It's been a while, but I was at Target shopping yesterday and I saw it. And I was like, you know what? Don't have it. It's one of my all-time favorites. Can't leave here without it. It was like $20. Dark Side of the Moon. Got it on vinyl.
I love Led Zeppelin. I almost bought my daughter a Dark Side of the Moon. Somebody out there is going, is he serious?
I really hope so. I hope that went over people's heads. Really do.
Yeah. A Dark Side of the Moon clock. It's like a guy, there's a guy in Asheville who takes either old vinyl records themselves or the covers when he can get them and turns them into like either clocks, coasters.
That's cool.
I don't know what you call them. It's like old 45s. Like what are those things? They hang down from the ceiling and they're all I don't know what they are. I don't know what they're called. I don't know what that's called. It's like a decorative thing in your house.
Yeah.
And they're like, 6 feet long. Some people have them with, shapes of, I don't know. I don't know what that's called. I should probably know this, but I don't. But those are pretty cool. And he's got like Pink Floyd ones or Zeppelin or the Stones or the Beatles or,
You had me at clocks and coasters.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, that's a cool business model.
I bought a set of 4 Grateful Dead album coasters, and you mentioned vinyl, and they're real. They're not reproductions. He goes out and scours the planet to find these things. I spent too much on it, but I got an original Terrapin Station album, and I put it straight into a frame, so I'm not going to play it.
You bought it to own it.
Yeah, there's an antique place in downtown Asheville, and it was like $50. But I was like, I don't care because it was
nice.
It was an original from 1977, 78, 77. I think that album came out. And I brought it home immediately. Went to Michael's, bought one of those album frames.
Oh yes.
It is now on the wall that quickly. So it's protected. It's behind glass. It ain't moving.
Protected like the Declaration of Independence.
My wife and
will not be stolen by Nicolas Cage.
My wife and daughter were like, I was like, I shouldn't spend. And they were like, you have to buy that. When's the last time you saw one? I was like, 1982. And they were like, yeah, you probably ought to get it.
That's a long time ago.
So anyway, I did that. Lots to get to this hour. Derek Scott, the voice of the Gamecocks, coming up for you. By the way, Riders on the Storm, another fun Storm song if you want something like that.
That's a top 5 all-time favorite band for me.
I love the Doors, man. And we did the day Ray Manzarek died, our whole show was basically about how Ray Manzarek changed music because the sound of the Doors, yes, Jim Morrison was Jim Morrison, but without Ray Manzarek playing that organ, I don't
ain't
think
happening.
There ain't a Doors. And the fact that he basically, wrote like all the music.
Which is another important thing about music. Somebody has to
write the music. Anyway, all right. So pretty big deal going on right now, y'all. Look, we know that the NCAA has lost case after case after case in court when it comes to what they've been doing with their rules. And if you're wondering why they keep losing, it's because for the first time in a long time, once the Ed O'Bannon case came around, somebody had the wherewithal, and that's the nice way to put it, to challenge them. because for decade upon decade, the NCAA just bullied people. I do remind you, schools did this first in the 80s with the television, Oklahoma and Georgia primarily. NCAA used to say, well, you can only play on TV a certain amount of times a year, which would, wait, what? How'd you come up with that? Well, it's fair.
Bad business idea.
Fair to whom? Well, okay, no. And then Oklahoma and Georgia were like, yeah, I think people want to see the better teams more often on television. And I think television feels that way too. They sued, they won. Ed O'Bannon, great UCLA basketball player. NCAA licensed his image and everybody else's image to EA Sports. EA was told, no, you're good because we control all that. Okay. Ed O'Bannon was like, yeah, no, I never signed off on that. So I'm going to sue you. And he won. And I've said before, that's the case where we all should have looked and said, and when I say we, those that run college athletics should have realized at that point, we're in trouble here. We need to revise our rules. They didn't. They fought. And then they fought some more. And then they fought some more after that. And here we are. So now there is a case called House versus NCAA. It is seeking back payments since the NCAA changed its rules a few years ago to begin to allow for name, image, likeness opportunities. And they are seeking, this is a class action suit, they're seeking roughly $1 billion in back payments over about a 5 or 6 year period. If this goes to court, they're going to win. So they need to settle, because if they lose, the NCAA, and hence its member institutions, let's not say the NCAA here. At some point, we need to really make the distinction. It's the member institutions that are the NCAA. They're going to lose. They would have to pay triple plus the fees and other damages, and it would basically be quadruple. They would be looking at about a $4 billion damage. So they're going to settle this, hopefully.
They're attempting to
settle it. Maybe they meet them at $1.5 billion. I don't know. But one of the big things that's going to come out of this is that they will also rework the landscape for the future. And I mentioned this to Terry and Tyler at the end of the halftime show. The lead attorney in this case, and a guy who has been representing college athletes in other cases the last few years, is a man named Jeffrey Kessler. And Mr. Kessler, about 30 years ago, give or take, was the attorney who represented Reggie White when Reggie White sued the NFL, because the NFL, believe it or not, even in the early 90s, did not have the form of free agency that we have now. The NFL was very restrictive. It was collectively bargained, but even then, Reggie White was like, yeah, this is just too restrictive. Like, I want to go do something else. Long story short, as most of you know, Reggie White won his case, and the landscape of the NFL changed forever. And that was roughly 20 years after Curt Flood did what he did in baseball. The difference was Curt Flood was basically ostracized. Reggie White still became was still amongst the greatest defensive linemen in the history of the game. So Kessler has experience not only in high-level representation of things like this, but in cases that literally changed the course of how business is done. And I believe that that's what we're looking at here too, Elijah. And I'll get into some of the details, but he's kind of tight-lipped right now, as he should be. He's got a case going on. You don't want to show too many cards. But he's basically said, yeah, this is what we're looking to do. We're gonna get some money for our clients because they deserve it. But then B, as part of the settlement, we want to rework how this is done.
Yeah, and that was my favorite thing about the entire report. And there's a lot there. So if you ever have the time, you're listening, you're like, oh, well, I would like to know more. Ross Dellinger goes pretty in depth, and he tries to what's the best way to put this? And this report tries to explain it as best as possible. But he mentioned, there's two parts of this entire thing that can happen. One, compensation owed to athletes for NIL and broadcast, which is the part of, back pay or the damages. And then part two is the future compensation and an actual revenue sharing model. And that's obviously where things are going to get a little little muddled here on the revenue sharing model, especially considering that, what teams in the SEC and Big Ten can do in terms of actually being able to give somebody or give your athletes a chunk of this pie is a lot different than what like Toledo can do, right? Sorry, Rockets. I mean, for you to catch a stray there, but you can't do that. And so there's going to be, some groundbreaking things that happen from this case. We might see a separation in terms of football of the G5. And the G5 have talked about, or at least some of the administrators have talked about having their own playoff, their own championships. And that might actually end up being more of a reality because of this exact same thing that's going to be a, I guess, side effect of a settlement. Because even though there are some detractors, there are some administrators who do not want to settle this at all for a multitude of reasons. It's more than likely, I think it is going to get settled. It reads like it, but this is going to finally provide a framework of how revenue can be distributed, and that gets you one step closer to players being able to organize, which we've talked about ad nauseum, and their ability to collectively bargain to the point where you can have rules on the exact same things that we complain about in terms of player movement and in compensation.
I don't know that we'll learn this, although somebody out there is probably digging, but you mentioned there are some college leaders that don't want to settle. And if I may, I just do not understand that. I'm not here to say, like, what are you smoking? Like, I'm not that guy, right? Like, you probably have some valid reasons. I'd like to know what they are.
Yeah.
Because if you're clinging to something that you know to be illegal, or if you're still hoping that somehow you're going to get help from Congress to get an antitrust exemption, I'm telling you, you're not. Because there's going to be enough people in Congress, especially if you get to the Senate side, that'll just filibuster this thing if there aren't enough protections for the athletes moving forward. I'm here to tell you. It really is that simple. You're not going to get the bipartisan support you're looking for. You're not going to get it this year anyway because we're in an election year. And that ship, in my opinion, has sailed. Now, if they found a way real quick to get something going to make everybody look good on TV back home in an election year, okay, but I doubt it has everything they're going to be looking for. I hope I'm wrong. I'd love to think that this summer they do pass something like that. But considering that we've not really seen any meaningful movement even out of committee yet onto the floor of either chamber, I just don't think that's happening in 2024. No. But again, I come back to my somewhat rhetorical question. Why are you fighting this? Why do you can't keep listen, you're not going back to say 15 years ago. Okay? So that's no longer status quo. And you can't possibly want what we have today and call that the status quo that you want to keep because there's no rules. You got states making all these this out of control crap. Listen, what you were doing, I remind all of you, was grossly illegal in the United States of America, and you have been told that by the highest court in the land. Now you've got Wild Wild West because you don't know what to do to make any rules. So why would you want to fight the evolution? Like that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, and some of the reasons that they gave, like in this Ross Dellinger story, are pretty solvable things. I feel like one, it says they believe it only offers some short-term protection against future lawsuits. No, I think it might actually, and this is my hypothesis here, eliminate further lawsuits, short-term and long-term, as long as you abide by the rules that are going to be laid out. I know it might, be unfortunate for the member institutions to have to abide by them. Then two, settlement may not end NIL-fueled arms race. Nothing's going to be completely fair. Nothing is at all.
Right.
Like Ohio State will always have more resources than Toledo.
Yes.
We're never going to stop that. No matter what type of legislation we do, we're going to tie ourselves in knots trying to do that.
Yeah, they'll have more than Iowa always does, and they're in the same conference.
Yeah, and then third, it's the settlements may not prevent excessive player movement. If they can collectively bargain, then you can control that.
Yeah.
Then it can be agreed upon. So that's not 100% a factual element here.
We'll get into a few more of those details on what this settlement could look like, especially as it reworks the landscape. You're listening to the Postgame Show. 20 minutes after 4 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. We'll go back in. Jay and Elijah with you. It's the post-game show from downtown Columbia. The voice of the Gamecocks, Derek Scott, coming up in just a few. So we'll put a fine cap for now on the story we've been discussing this hour, and that is a potential settlement of a case called House versus NCAA. It is seeking back pay for NIL payments since the NCAA revised its rules a few years ago. But perhaps more importantly than that back payment to former student athletes, this will reshape what college football, college basketball especially, are able to do, or college sports in general. But let's face it, those are the money makers. I mean, look, at some places, baseball and hockey do okay, and certainly at a place like Carolina or Connecticut, women's basketball can make you some money. But we all know, by and large across the country, the two big revenue generators, although women's basketball is beginning to generate a lot more revenue, which is good. But you all get the point. We had the story yesterday to blend it in. It's not in Ross Dellinger's piece, and Pete Thamel and Dan Murphy have their piece at ESPN.com today. Ross, of course, writes for Yahoo. We had the story yesterday of the UAB football team getting together and all joining a group called athletes.org. That's a players association. And while it's not going to be a union, and so you won't be necessarily unionizing, let's play semantics here with the difference between organizing and unionizing. And a players association isn't a union, but it may well be something that, can work with conferences, because I think that's where a lot of this is going to go. And then within the framework of the NCAA in some capacity. But to Elijah's point from a little while ago, one of the things that you're looking at here is that maybe a percentage or either a number, I don't know which it's going to be. Ross Dellinger's piece says that there will be a number that's arrived at that athletic departments will have to put aside. And this kind of goes with what Governor Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, proposed, I guess around Christmas time, right? Give or take. That, hey, if you have X amount that you can put away every year, then you're part of like the new club, the new level of the NCAA.
A subdivision, if you will.
Yeah. And, we could be headed there if that number's 20 million. Now, the difference, of course, is, and Ross has this in his piece, Ohio State generates about $250 million a year in revenue. If you're wondering, South Carolina has roughly $100 million less than that. And then even in the SEC, Mississippi State has about $50 million less than that. Mississippi State's around $100 million in generated revenue, not in profits, but in generated revenue on an annual basis. So if it's a number and it's 20 million, that's going to be a big ask for Mississippi State. It's a decent ask for South Carolina. It's not chump change for Ohio State. Would a percentage be better? Might that be part of what this settlement looks like? I don't know. Again, I don't think from all the different things I've read about this, Elijah, we're not getting an antitrust exemption for college athletics. So some level of national organization is going to be the way to go. And how this settlement approaches that is really one of the great unknowns right now. And as you pointed out, there are people that want to fight this. Again, what do they want if they fight? And what do they want? If fighting maybe is, I don't know if it's too strong for some of these people, but really making sure that we hold on to some level of amateurism.
Pushback. It's just a lot of pushback.
I know a lot of schools, I get it, don't want these men and women to be considered employees. I don't know if there's going to be a choice. In the grand scheme. And what does that look like? I don't know, because then you have employment laws in different states again, rather than some type of national standard. So I understand that there are a lot of things to try and pull through here and see, where am I? You're in a thick forest right now. I get it. A thick jungle even, and all you got some rusty old machete. So hopefully somebody comes in and just actually takes you out of the jungle entirely, so you're not cutting it down. And hey, you don't need to be here. Let's get you back to the trail, back to the national park, back to civilization.
Where the people are supposed to be.
Yeah, you've gone way too far into here. We're not trying to cut down the jungle. We're trying to get you out of the jungle, to stay with that kind of analogy. Jeffrey Kessler had a great quote here. I want to kind of close with this because, again, I can't sit here and tell you what's it going to look like. Some form, I will say, some form of national organization, I think, is paramount. And I'm curious, as I said yesterday, too, what this athletes.org group is able to do. And can they get a couple of Power 4 now conference schools on board? Yeah, RIP, Pac-12. Didn't need to happen. By the way, quick aside. Second most draft picks last weekend, Pac-12.
8 first-rounders.
Pac-12. 25% of the first round played in the Pac-12. They're going to be good next year in the Pac-12. Oh.
Wait a minute.
Too soon.
Pac-12 no longer exists. I don't know what you're talking about. It's been erased from my memory.
Terrible. Just terrible. But that's part of where, it's a weird casualty of where we are. But that didn't need to happen. I digress. Again, Northwestern football players tried a few years ago to unionize, and it didn't work. Might Northwestern try again as a Big Ten school? Might there be some, and I'm just throwing out names, would Oregon try? Would Syracuse try? Would Clemson try? Would Carolina try? Yeah, I don't know. But UAB, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, too, because UAB's athletic department isn't like, down the road at Alabama, Like, those are two completely different schools, not separated, geographically very far.
About a half
but
hour.
with completely different needs and things that will work at one place and won't work at another in terms of just organizational skilling, right?
Right.
Like, completely different needs, completely different budgets, completely different capabilities and what those athletic departments can do. UAB is going to be an interesting case study just because they are at that G5 level and they're a high-ish profile G5 in terms of people go to their football games, people go to their basketball games. It has some local support, whereas you go to some and, they're ghost towns, right?
And it's in a football-mad southern city.
Yeah, and it's not too big to the point where we're gonna be able to learn a lot exactly how the G5 survives in a modern-day college football landscape with how successful this is, and if these players are able to make it to where it is a mutually beneficial. That's what we're looking for.
Yes.
We're looking for athletes and these schools to have mutually beneficial relationships with no one getting the rug pulled out from under them.
That's what collective bargaining is all about, right? Let me read you this quote. This is from Jeffrey Kessler in Dellinger's piece. Quote, "Change is here. It is not going to stay the same. It's already different. The best thing that everybody should think about is, how can we make this change the most positive change for everyone involved? Stop living a vision that doesn't exist. Face the realities here because it's going to happen. The question is, are you going to be part of that change or not be part of that change?" That's from the lead attorney in this case, who wants, I think, ultimately wants good for everybody, which is what he's saying there. But to go back to these antiquated ways, like you said, it ain't happening.
Nope.
So, that's where we are. It's unfortunate that we got here. Didn't need to happen. What do we do about it? We'll see what happens next on that one. All right, come back on the other side of the break. Back into some Gamecock baseball talk for you. The voice of the Gamecocks, our good friend Derek Scott, joins us. Try to get in a little hoops as well. Derek will be with us as the postgame show continues.
From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to get to you that are causing some delays on the roadways this afternoon. All these here are going to be in Richland County. We'll start with an accident that was reported on Trentham Road at Highway 12 near Forest Drive. Also have another one on Beatty Road near Broad River Road. Lastly, we have a disabled vehicle, in Richland County that's got the right lane completely blocked on I-26 westbound. That's going to be over near the Columbia Avenue exit 91. Again, a disabled vehicle has the right lane completely blocked on 26 westbound over near the Columbia Avenue exit.
Time to talk some Carolina baseball. The voice of the Gamecocks, Derek Scott, joining us for his regular Tuesday visit. Always appreciate his time. He and Stuart Lake back in the booth tomorrow night at Founders Park as Carolina takes on ETSU, and then hitting the airways to the other SEC Columbia this weekend for an interesting and somewhat pivotal SEC series. Always good to have you, sir. Looking at the last few results here, and certainly a nice win in the series against Kentucky in a big shutout, but I don't know, from your perspective, is this team getting hot? Is it just rounding into form? How might you describe where they are right now?
Wow, that's a great question. I feel like, to be honest with you, in this league, as deep as it is, it's really hard this time of year to get truly hot. Because there's just too many other good teams to allow for much in the way of winning streaks. Unless you just get a piece of the schedule where you find a way to string together a few of the squads who aren't really as competitive this year. And when I say competitive, I don't mean, that might be a little harsh, but aren't on the front line.
Right.
For instance, the first 4 weeks of Kentucky's conference schedule, at the time we didn't know it, but as it turns out, they were playing a lighter portion of the schedule. Now, that still, doesn't minimize what they did, running off as many wins as they did with only one loss. But that's where it can happen. I don't think you can look at the team South Carolina's played and expect that to happen here, especially of late. So, yeah, I think you could look at the way they played the last 3 weeks and say that's a pretty good streak. The record might not quite reflect what you think a hot streak looks like, but I certainly feel like 2 of 3 at Florida, 1 of 3 against Arkansas with, coupled with the loss on Friday being 2-1 against Hagen Smith, and then 2 of 3 this weekend and being so close to a sweep. That to me stands up pretty good for the way they've played the last 3 weekends. And really, I think overall, just take a look at the entire month of April. I feel pretty good about what we've seen from this team in that stretch, even though it hasn't necessarily reflected one portion of the team, whether it's offense or pitching, being just consistently good throughout that.
Derek, I'd love to ask you about the absolute gem Nick Lodolo threw last night against the Padres, but we'll keep it Gamecock baseball related here, and keep it specifically in the series against Kentucky because they played 3 games and ain't one of them normal, right? You had a lot of wacky stuff in all 3, but one of the main takeaways is that the bats came alive, and I think Mark Kingston might have found him something with this new type of order with Talmadge moving to short, Gavin Casas playing at third. That lineup combination raked pretty well for the 2 games that it was utilized for.
Absolutely, it did. And the funny thing about that is, I really feel like when he told us all that was what was coming, I know there was some hesitation. There was some pause from some folks about, whoa, we serious about this? And then as it turned out, especially on Sunday, they managed themselves. They handled themselves very well in the field. And it most certainly put you in a better spot offensively. Any of the holes in the lineup that had been seen weren't there. And, it starts with the improvements they've made at the top of the order with the adjustments there. And then, if there were guys lately in conference play that were really struggling, it probably was, if you thought about who was on that list, you're probably thinking Tippett and Brewer at the top of that list. And with the ability to plug in other folks in those spots, then you didn't really have any spots in the lineup where you go, these just aren't competitive at bats right now. So that's a really good thing. And if, as Mark said to me, if you have to give up something to get something, that's a chance I'm willing to take right now. And it certainly, I thought, paid dividends over that 2-game stretch.
Is it discernible enough to you and Stewart? I mean, to maybe see. I hate to say that where the drop-off is defensively, because that maybe sounds like it's too harsh or too stark a difference with Tippett out or something like that, Derek, or the guys shifting their positions around. But is it noticeable? I mean, do you see, well, he just doesn't have that range, he can't make that throw? What might be different defensively?
I thought it might be that, Jay. I really did. I thought there might be a range question, but I didn't see it once the game started. And I thought that I was really, as much as anything, I was worried about Kentucky's ability to play that West Coast style of baseball with a lot of bunting and slashing and running that could put inexperienced first and third basemen in a bad spot. And it didn't happen. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Costas is as comfortable playing, bunts and slow rollers as Lee Croy would be, but he certainly didn't look scared of it. He was incredibly aggressive at third base, coming in and playing tight. And Petrie's footwork isn't nearly as good as Costas' at first base. He didn't make any alarming mistakes that had you go, oh, this just isn't going to work. So, I definitely thought at first blush, based on 18 innings, that there's no reason to think he had to go away from it as we move forward this week. In fact, if anything, try and use it tomorrow night just to get him some more reps in a less pressurized situation. And then the other thing is, if the range question comes into play, it might be more exaggerated on AstroTurf, and you're not going to see anything of that nature until you go to Tennessee. And let's be honest, the way Tennessee swings the bats, you're not worried about how many ground balls you field against those dudes.
Fair enough. They do launch a lot of home runs, and you got to pitch well to avoid that ball leaving the park. And I think we're starting to see a good weekend rotation with the Friday, being Roman Kimball / Ty Good, because this past Friday they got them pretty deep into the ball game. Eli didn't have an Eli weekend, but you still feel really confident with him being a weekend starter. And then I think Dylan Eskew kind of put on a sinker ball pitching clinic on Sunday. How confident do you think this team is right now with that type of rotation moving forward?
I think they should be. If anything, right now my concern, at least in the moment, because, with pitching, it feels like it changes week to week. But right now, I'm concerned about anything. It's a little bit about the fact that Eli Jones the last 2 weeks has not looked nearly as sharp as he had earlier in the season. You moved him to Saturday because you felt like he was the guy that could give you the most length. And therefore, if you needed more bullpen help on Friday and Sunday, at least maybe you get that day off in between. And then it didn't work that way, but it didn't hurt the team because SQ is so good on Sunday. But, I'm a little more, I guess, going to be curious to see how Eli responds at Missouri, because that's not a good offense. That's an impotent offense, in fact. And so if he comes in and does what he's done more often than not prior to these last 2 weeks, he ought to be just fine against that team. So I am really anxious to see how that looks. The problem with Missouri is not going to be can you can contain their offense. It's typically going to be much more about what can you do with their pitching, because really underrated pitching staff they've got out there.
Staying with going to Columbia, Missouri, our dear friend Tommy Moody used to complain certainly about you guys having to shift positions in a bad press box, but also that it was just a really weird vibe. Why? Look, Florida got swept there earlier this year. Missouri's not very good. Just look at the record. The record is what it is at this point, Derek. Why is it harder to go there and win when they're not always a very good baseball team?
Yeah, Florida got swept there this year. Tennessee got swept there last year. But in both instances, I think both of those series were in March. I think you're going to have more problems there early in the year because of temperatures than anything. But it also comes down to anywhere you play on the road, there's an inherent home field advantage because of knowing the surroundings and being just more comfortable at home, playing better at home. I think that's step one. Step two is the weather. Step 3 is the lack of atmosphere. And can you make sure the young guys who, probably by and large haven't been in that scenario before take it as seriously as they need to? Are they going to be as dialed in for a series there as they were for a series in Gainesville 2 weeks ago? That's the question mark. I think that those would be the standard answers for me as to why it happened. But again, like I said, Missouri's offense not good at all. Missouri's pitching really pretty good. And again, we were just joking about how you don't have to worry about ground balls at Tennessee. Well, they did, because Missouri on Saturday and Sunday absolutely contained the Tennessee offense. I mean, both of those were one-run games, and I think they were either 3-2 or 4-3, somewhere in that neighborhood, both days. So, yeah, since Tim Jamison came back, Tim Jamison was their head coach in their, quote, glory days when they were in the Big 12 and they made their fair share of postseasons. And, he coached a lot of pitchers there that went on to major league success, not the least of which is, drawing a blank. Max. What's Max's last
name?
Scherzer?
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it Scherzer?
Yeah,
Scherzer was there. That's right. He was Missouri, wasn't he? Dang.
They've had some really good arms, and Jameson was the guy then. He was the head coach, but he was the pitching coach. Well, their new head coach this year is a guy who was an assistant under him back in the day, and he brought Jameson back with him to be the pitching coach. And they throw it pretty doggone well, and I don't think as many folks notice because you just look at the record. But you're going to have to find a way to score runs out there, and that won't be as easy as people probably just off the cuff would think it would be.
Derek and Stewart on the call tomorrow night, Carolina ETSU, and this weekend in Como. Thank you, sir, as always. Appreciate you.
You got it, guys.
That's Derek Scott. A big ranking at number 1 for the Gamecocks in the SEC. I will explain when the postgame show continues. Welcome back into the postgame show on this Tuesday. Jay and Elijah with you. Thanks again to the voice of the Gamecocks, Derek Scott, for joining us. For those of you who are interested, and you know who you are out there, Bayern Munich and Real Madrid tied at 2 in the stoppage time. So no extra time in this game, but this is leg one of the Champions League semifinal. 2-2. Each team has had a penalty in the last little bit.
Their knockout stages are a lot like humans, 2 legs.
Yeah.
Until you get to the championship. Championship's just one.
See what you did there.
No.
This could have been Arsenal instead of Bayern, but it's not. All right. So typically, I say typically, in a lot of instances, South Carolina and its fan base find themselves maybe in the middle of SEC rankings, right? Recruiting rankings and things like that, or, like even right now in baseball, like you got a good baseball team, but you're, in sort of that middle third right now of the conference, right? Well, I have a new ranking. I wish I could tell you who put these out, but they've got official logos on them. And my buddy Adam Piper threw this out a little while ago. This is Southeastern Conference schools ranked by walking distance from their football stadium to the nearest Waffle House.
Oh, hell yeah.
And ladies and gentlemen, congratulations. The University of South Carolina leads the SEC in walking distance from its football stadium to the nearest Waffle House. It is only 0.2 miles down Bluff Road to that Waffle House. That beats Tuscaloosa and Bryant-Denny Stadium by another 0.2 miles. That's right.
Hang the banner.
It is twice as far to get to Waffle House from Bryant-Denny than it is from Williams-Brice. 0.4 miles in Tuscaloosa. Third on the list, another 0.2 miles from Sanford Stadium to the nearest Waffle House in Athens. So it's 0.6 miles. It's 0.9 miles to the nearest Waffle House from Jordan-Hare in fourth. In fifth, what do they call it? The Commonwealth Stadium, Kroger Field, Kentucky.
Kroger Field, yep.
Mile and a half. That's a long way to walk after a game if you've been, enjoying the game. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, if you consumed pregame and postgame content.
It's also 1.5 miles, so it's high from Faro Field in Como to the nearest Waffle House. 1.6 miles for Razorback Stadium. What is it? Reynolds Razorback, I think they call it. 1.6 miles in Fayetteville.
I have a hypothesis on who's last.
Well, I don't know. Okay. Hold it. Do you want it? Well, no, I don't want you to tell me who you think it is.
Okay.
Here's what I want you to do right now.
Write it down.
Write it down, and then show it to me. All right. In eighth, it's 2.2 miles from the Swamp to the nearest Waffle House in the Gainesville area. 2.2 miles. It's 2.7 miles from, Vaught Hemingway. That's Ole Miss's Stadium. 2.7 miles in the Oxford area. Hell, you're out of Oxford at that point.
Oxford's a square.
Yeah, I mean,
That's all
it ain't real big. 2.9 miles in Norman, and forgive me, I forget the name of their stadium. I should know this. I'll think of it in a second.
Adrian Peterson Stadium.
2.9, I don't know. Yeah. Switzer Field.
Might as well be.
And that's 10th for Oklahoma. We'll count them now. 3.3 miles in 11th place from the nearest Waffle House to Vanderbilt. Now, okay. 3.3. Well, then I got to tell you, you're going to be shocked. You're way off. Because I was surprised by the one that's in last.
Huh.
But come on, they're 3.3 miles?
Yeah. Oh, Vanderbilt's on the west end of town. You're still technically in downtown Nashville. Not a lot of Waffle Houses there.
3.7 miles from Mississippi State to the nearest Waffle House. They're in 12th. 3.8 miles from Death Valley to the nearest one in Baton Rouge. 3.8 miles. Hey, Baton Rouge, step up your Waffle House game. You're a big city.
I guess they don't make corn dogs at Waffle House, so why would they have it anywhere near Tiger Stadium?
And Nashville's a big city too, but
they don't think they have whiskey and corn dogs there at the Waffle House, so why would anyone go?
here's another one that surprised me. In 14th place, Tennessee. It's 5.4 miles from Neyland Stadium to the nearest Waffle House in Knoxville.
A lot of things are 5.4 miles. That makes sense. I can see that. I can absolutely see that.
I mean, 5 miles, though? 5.5? 5.9 miles in Austin to the nearest Waffle House from the football stadium. But in last place, and I don't know what town it's in, but the nearest Waffle House to College Station is 69 miles away.
Why is it so far away?
Hey, Waffle House, y'all got to put a Waffle House in at least in Bryant, if not College Station.
Are there Waffle Houses separated from other Waffle House restaurants 69 miles apart?
No. I mean, I think about the one on Garner's Ferry. There's like two that are like a half mile apart from each other here in Columbia.
That feels anti-American.
So, but anyway, Carolina leads the way in the SEC.
Hang the banner.
Headlines coming up.
I do love Waffle House, but I also love Prize Picks because Prize Picks is helping me get in on the playoff action this year more so than ever. And all I got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and I can win up to about 100 times my money on as little as 4 picks. Sounds easy, right? They also have injury insurance, so you have a player get hurt in the first half of a game. They can't come back in the second. Prize Picks has your back. They also offer Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account, and they also have weekly promotions and special offers for the biggest moments in the basketball playoffs and in the hockey playoffs. Tonight, I'm going to be very all in on a couple of Bruins players to score goals because I think they close out the series against the Maple Leafs. All you got to do is download the app today. Use promo code 1075GAME for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's promo code 1075GAME for a Prize Picks deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. From the WIS Traffic Center, I'm Elijah Campbell with a couple of accidents to report to you that are causing some issues on the roadways this afternoon. All of them here in Richland County. We have one reported here in the last 10 minutes or so on Green Lawn Drive near Trinity Drive. It's causing some mild traffic backup. A disabled vehicle is still causing some delay on I-26 westbound over at the Columbia Avenue exit 91. However, the right lane is no longer completely blocked, so traffic is still moving pretty slowly, but not as slowly as it was about an hour ago. On I-77 northbound, an accident at Leesburg Road near exit 9B is causing some traffic backup, as well as one on Trenham Road at Highway 12 near Forest Drive.
It is 5 o'clock news time, and thanks as always to Integrated Media. Jay Phillips, Elijah Campbell with you. It's also the beginning of the final hour of today's edition of the Postgame Show. We will start with a report from Pete Thamel and Dan Murphy of ESPN, college sports leaders involved in what the men describe as deep discussions to reach a legal settlement that would likely lay out what revenue sharing with athletes looks like and the future business model of the NCAA. I read verbatim here from their piece from earlier today. The NCAA and its power conferences are defendants in an antitrust class action lawsuit called House versus NCAA, which argues that the association is breaking federal law by placing any restrictions on how athletes make money from selling the rights to their name, image, or likeness. The case is scheduled to go to court in January of 2025. If the plaintiffs win at trial, the NCAA and its schools could be liable to pay more than $4 billion in damages, which has motivated many leaders across the industry to seek a settlement. Elijah and I mentioned a lot of this earlier in the program today. This is certainly about compensating athletes from the years that the NCAA allowed this to happen and could not make any money. So it's not going, all the way back. But more importantly, as described, should also lay out what the NCAA business model looks like moving forward. Will it include some form of organization of athletes and collective bargaining with schools, conferences, the NCAA itself? Listen, if everybody agrees, then you rarely have grounds for lawsuits. And Elijah mentioned this earlier. One of the pushbacks, I suppose, from some in the college leadership side of things say this doesn't offer enough protection. Well, again, that's where, it might not offer enough protection. Well, that's what you collectively bargain. And you have time periods. And that's why you sometimes see strikes or lockouts. And while none of us want that, what you have to realize is what you said here is the grounds for this lawsuit and the grounds for the lawsuits the NCAA has already lost, and in some cases lost mightily. You're breaking the law. It's that simple.
Getting right out of the building.
Yeah. I mean, I know we've said it a bunch for those of you who listen to us routinely about these things. And why are we in this situation? Why is it the Wild Wild West? I don't like all this. Nobody likes it. But you can't break the law. I don't know what else to say. I really try to keep it simple in things like this. You can't say, you can't break the law, but, no. There's no but.
Not without repercussion.
Right.
I guess you can technically break the law, but you are subject to punishment once you do.
Yeah. Or in this case, you mentioned repercussions, consequences. What we are looking at right now, y'all, with every state making an NIL law and certain schools doing certain things certain ways and whatever the heck else is going on right now, these are the consequences of inaction for more than a decade by the NCAA. And this is the next case. They have to settle this. And when I say they, I don't mean both sides. I mean the colleges have to settle this, because if they don't and they're paying out 4 times what they're already going to pay, I don't know what that looks like.
Doomsday potential.
Yeah, I don't know what that looks like. I mean, there's only so much money that Disney and Fox can keep paying you to go around.
Only so much money exists. At some point, you can get slapped with a tag of, hey, you got to pay this amount of money, and you'd be like, we ain't got that.
And I'm not sure, Jeff Bezos ain't walking through that door,
No.
And hey, every college game is now on Amazon Prime. Like, I think Jeff is still more interested in selling, shoes and books and whatever else you can buy on Amazon. Everything.
Insert item here.
Sure.
You can't get it on Amazon.
But involved in deep discussions. A lot of these folks met in the Dallas area over the last few days. They were already having college football playoff meetings there, so they were able to do this. And before I move on to the next story, I'll just remind everybody, if you haven't heard, the lead attorney in this case for the plaintiffs, for the student athletes, is a man named Jeffrey Kessler, who has been successful already in several of the lawsuits that have been won and argued in this same district court in California. He was also the lead attorney about 30 years ago when the great Reggie White sued the National Football League over its, to keep it short and simple, lack of free agency rules, and certainly those that were stilted toward the owners. Reggie White and Jeffrey Kessler won that case, and it changed free agency in the NFL forever. A lot of people believe that it's the change college sports forever outcome that is most important with this, not so much because, look, if you settle and you got to pay out $1 billion, collectively, you might say we'll pay it out, $100 million a year for 10 years. And that's something that's affordable, and you've got the money to do it.
That's a Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah, paying out $400 million over 10 years, maybe a lot harder to do.
It's like 6 Jimbo Fishers.
So something to think about. But deep discussions is how it has been reported to Pete Thamel and Dan Murphy. We'll keep our eyes on that one. Continuing with our headlines of the day, NBA news. I was just telling Elijah as I was pulling this up here for the headlines, I am fascinated by the career arc of Brad Stevens. Brad, of course, was the very young phenom coach at Butler, took him to 2 straight national title games. They didn't win, but, man, you got Butler to back-to-back national title games. Went on to be a very successful head coach of the Boston Celtics and then moved up the ladder to become the president of the team. Today, Brad Stevens was named the Executive of the Year by his peers in the NBA, winning 16 of 29 first-place votes. Sam Presti of Oklahoma City, who's also very good at what he does, was second, but distantly second, with 47 points to Brad's 101. It's funny, too, because, I've seen a lot of college basketball fans when there's an opening, right? Some even down here last year. But whatever, Ohio State just a couple of weeks ago and places like that, like, oh, you got to go get Brad Stevens. And it's like, y'all know what Brad Stevens does now? Brad Stevens is running the best organization in the NBA, and it's an organization that will always do what it can to be great. And now he's made them once again. Now, I don't know if that means Boston's going to go win the NBA championship.
They're one of the favorites.
But they're across the board good at what they do. He's managed the numbers. He's managed the personnel. He knows the game. Brad Stevens isn't going back to coach in college. I don't think Brad Stevens ever going to coach again.
I think this is the destination job for him.
Yeah.
This is a dream gig.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing you might do, and I don't know, I'm not trying to run him out the door or anything, is go do this with another, like, what if the Los Angeles Lakers came calling? And I kind of mean,
I would die.
Like, not just some other team. I'm talking about, what if the Lakers came calling? Maybe the Bulls, but the Bulls aren't more historically important than the Lakers. There's 2 teams that are more historically important than any other. He's already the executive of the year at one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's Lakers, there's Celtics. The Bulls became great because of one dude. The Knicks are certainly the Knicks. They got a massive following. The Heat have become a thing because of Pat Riley,
who has that exact same job.
Has done that quite well. I mean, he keeps them good, but like the only thing I could see, right, is, well, hey, Jeannie Buss calls you and says, hey, Brad, I need you to move to L.A. I found you a great house. All right. Got you a driver because traffic sucks here. All right. It's all good.
It's Brad, what's the largest number you've ever heard of? We'll match it. It's the largest number ever. The largest number you've ever possibly, could think of.
But
We'll match it.
It's just I said to you, and I use the word again. It's just a fascinating career arc. Because I figured, when he was doing what he was doing at Butler, I was like, man, like when Roy retires, what could he do at Chapel Hill? Or when Coach K retires, what could he do at Duke? Never would you have thought.
Surpassed all that.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, I'm going to go make the Boston Celtics. Again, he was a really good coach for the Boston Celtics. He was good.
Yep.
Dude knows the game.
He's a wizard. He's an absolute wizard, not a Washington wizard.
Yeah, but doing
real
this.
one.
So there you go. The NBA Executive of the Year is Brad Stevens. So congratulations to Brad. Speaking of the NBA and the Celtics, they easily beat the Heat in Miami last night, 102-88 to go up 3-1. The Thunder end up sweeping the Pelicans, 97-89 the final last night. The Thunder move on. Nuggets eliminated the Lakers last night, 108-106. Tonight in the association, Sixers and Knicks. New York is up 3-1. This is at the Garden, and apparently Joel Embiid is questionable. He did not attend shoot-around because of a migraine.
He's playing.
Yeah, I imagine he's in a, and I mean this because I know people that suffer from migraines. He's probably in a nice, quiet, cool room with, whatever you can take that doesn't knock you loopy.
Yeah. And he's probably taking a nap that's going to last about 3 hours.
Yeah.
Try to sleep it off.
But Knicks up 3-1 in that one. Cavs and Magic tied at 2. Game 5 tonight in Cleveland. And the Pacers are in Milwaukee where they could eliminate the Bucks tonight. Indiana is up 3-1. I didn't see the latest, but no, Giannis or Dame.
Both of them are doubtful.
Yeah, doubtful. And I know when the Clippers come back around, Kawhi is doubtful for that. I guess that's tomorrow night when they play the Mavs.
Yeah, Kawhi can just put in doubtful for every game. He's
Yeah,
100%
bless his
healthy.
heart, man.
He's
That's
doubtful. Always doubtful.
And yet he's already been named to the Olympic team. And I'm like, well, and I'm being serious. Like, all right, what if they advance and he's got to keep playing? What can he do for America?
Yeah, Kawhi can only do so much on the bench.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to use all 12 that are going to be on this roster.
Braves lost 2-1 last night in Seattle. They go at it again tonight at 9:40 out on the West Coast, or I guess in the Pacific Northwest. And if my computer will cooperate, I'm trying to get you tonight's pitching matchup, but unfortunately my computer is not cooperating. So
I can tell you who it's not.
No, yeah, it's not. It's not Max Fried and your boy
Bryce Miller. Both those dudes tossed absolute gems last night. It was a clinic.
Yeah, 2-1. But the Braves. Braves now have a 1.5 game. Thank God that the Phillies lost, too. So they're both on one-game losing streaks. I think each of those teams has won 8 of their last 10. Oof. They're very good.
Yeah, that's talk about baseball experiments. Talked about in the last hour with Derek about Coach Kingston experimenting a little bit with the hitting lineup and sacrificing some defense. Well, if he needed an example, look no further than the Philadelphia Phillies because they've gone to a World Series and another NLCS. By completely neglecting the defensive part of baseball and just going all in on dudes who can absolutely rake.
Yeah.
And it's worked out pretty well for him.
Yeah, over the course of the regular season, it doesn't matter, but or it doesn't help you as much, but in a short series,
it helps
if
you
I
a
score
lot.
more than you, I win.
That's the rule. Yeah. We have never told a lie on this show, and that's one of them.
Fact. If you score more than the other team, you win.
I like your chances. The EBPI, the JBPI, any type of baseball or basketball power index will tell you if you score more points, you're the winner.
Yeah. Well, who was the guy? What was the say? I have somebody that said it in one of their press conferences. Like you can't lose in the NFL and win. I forget who said it. Was one of the talking.
I think it was Ron Jaworski.
Yeah, one of those talking heads a few years back. Like you can't lose in the NFL and win. I was like, there you go.
You know what?
There you go.
Attaboy, Jaws.
That's the way to analyze things. Reynaldo Lopez goes for the Braves tonight. He's having a magnificent season. 2-0 with a .72 ERA in 25 innings. Luis Castillo goes for the Mariners. He's having a decent year. Well, he's really not actually. 2-4 with a 4.15. 42 strikeouts, though, and just 7 walks. That's pretty good.
That's the Luis Castillo experience.
But
if you're touching the ball, you're getting it out of the park.
He's also given up 5 home runs in 34 2/3. That is your headline of the day, brought to you by our great friends at Integrated Media to watch baseball, football, all kinds of things. Or even get little jobs done, like help with installing your video doorbell. Yes, no job too small, no job too big. Integrated Media does it all. Call them up and even go play a little golf at Pro Swing. 803-948-8327. Our good friends at Integrated Media, ready to help you out with any and all of your home theater and home security needs. That's Integrated Media. Do the Gamecocks have a nice opportunity to host in the NCAA baseball tournament? Elijah and I will tell you what the numbers are looking like as the postgame show continues. AAA Heating and Air, they are really the guardians against your discomfort when it comes to the heat of the summer in the Midlands. Let their expert team ensure that you always feel great. And with guaranteed financing, the luxury more accessible than ever because of this. 12 months, no payments or interest in 2024. You heard me right. Guaranteed financing, no payments or interest in 2024. Plus, you get the 15-year parts and labor guarantee. 15 years, y'all. Not 15 months, 15 years. So if you're making that investment now, you can be assured that you're going to stay nice and comfortable for many years to come. They've done great work at my house. My family loves the folks at AAA Heating and Air. Roy and Dana Finley have fantastic people making sure that you stay comfortable all year long, no matter what. Get a free quote today at call AAAtoday.com or give them a shout on the phone at 803-677-1500. Tell them we sent you here at 107.5 The Game, and stay cool with AAA Heating and Air.
Well, it's just a bunch of older, experienced hitters that can grind out at bats. And sometimes in our league, sometimes in college baseball, especially now in 2024 with the advent of the transfer portal, it's really important that you just have as many older, experienced guys giving workmanlike, tough at-bats as you possibly can. That's what leads to rallies continuing on instead of maybe fizzling out. And so we decided to sacrifice a little bit of defense in the hopes that it would really, give us a lot of help offensively. And so far in the short term, that's exactly what's happened.
That was Coach Mark Kingston on with Elijah and me yesterday, talking about some of the changes that he and the staff made to that hitting order. It produced a whole mess of runs over the weekend, 29 of them to be exact. South Carolina taking that series from number 3 Kentucky 2-1. Back at it tomorrow night against East Tennessee State, and then this weekend in Columbia, Missouri for what is, a pivotal, a somewhat crucial series. I want to be careful. As I said yesterday, by the way, welcome back in. Hi, Jay and Elijah with you on this Tuesday afternoon. It's not must win because you've got, 11 games left. Well, you'll have 10 games after tomorrow. So before you go there, you got one off the board. But, it's you better win. And I know there's not much difference in that, but you better win this series because they're not very good. And Derek Scott was on with us about an hour ago and made a good point, Elijah. A lot of times teams that don't fare well in Columbia, Missouri often see that happen to them in the earlier portion of the conference baseball season in Como when it's colder. Now it'll be May for South Carolina. You'd like to think that's going to help. He also said sometimes you just get sucked into the fact that he said the environment, what he means is there is none.
Lack thereof.
Yeah, they just don't have fans that really go and turn that into anything. So, but a lot of you I know are wondering, by the way, I believe our friends at D1 Baseball will have their latest national projection tomorrow. I know last week they put it out on, I think they're doing those on Wednesdays, so we'll have more on this tomorrow afternoon. But a lot of people are asking right now where Carolina is. I know there was a write-up about them yesterday in The Athletic, and you got to feel good about it. And one of the things that we talked about yesterday, Elijah, you and me, was you've got a nice feather in the cap with a tiebreaker against Vanderbilt. And not just won the series, you swept them. And that if that needs to count for something, you have to believe that it's going to. As it stands right now, South Carolina is 11th in the RPI, but that is 6th in the Southeastern Conference, right? Yeah, A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky, 1, 2, 3. Tennessee is 5. Georgia is 9. South Carolina is 11. For what it is worth, Clemson is 4th and North Carolina is 7th. So you've got all these games against Quad 1. Right now, South Carolina is 12-12 in Quad 1 games. That's very, very, again, you've played 24. Kentucky's great. They're 14-4 in Quad 1. So they've got the most wins. South Carolina, I'm making sure here, of the teams in the top 30, South Carolina has the second most Quad 1 wins behind Kentucky, and you just beat Kentucky 2-1. So, again, that also can count for you in some degree. Now, am I telling you that South Carolina is definitely going to host? No, can't do that. If the season ended today, yeah, I think they would.
They'd be close.
Yeah. I think they would. The question becomes how many SEC schools get to host. Like, for instance, Alabama's behind you. They're 14th. They beat you. And Alabama has also played 24 Quad 1 games. The difference is Bama's 10-14. So, but they beat you. Again, there's the margins are going to be so thin. I firmly believe that A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee will be hosting and will also probably be top 8s. Now, you and I were talking, though, and Derek made a point, too. Kentucky's hitting a little bit of a skid. Just a little bit. but it's enough to start going, will they be top 8?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if they can go 6-3 in their final 9, then I think they're going to be fine. But what if they go 3-6? What if they go even 4-5? I don't know. Again, not sure, because Clemson's very good. Florida State's very good. North Carolina's very good. And I firmly believe East Carolina is going to host in the first round for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know. I don't know if they give them a top 8, and then they may well deserve one. But I think that's going to be one you got to think about. Mm-hmm. You know, again, Carolina plays Georgia next week. You can almost look at that as sort of a de facto elimination series in terms of hosting potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know, but Carolina's doing enough. If you're wondering, is Carolina doing enough to host? Yes, they are at this point.
And it might not seem like it just because the sheer amount of losses, and that's human nature, right? You lose the amount of games that South Carolina has. It's fair to be like, well, can we host? Because if you look at all the teams that in the RPI that are in the top 15, only one team has lost more than South Carolina, and that's Alabama, who's sitting at 16 losses right now. But the schedule is so loaded to the point where if you're able to win half the quad 1 games you play, especially since they're high caliber quad 1s, because look, Kentucky's having a great year. I don't want to keep making it sound like I'm just dumping all over Kentucky. There's going to be some natural regression because their SEC slate was backloaded.
Yeah.
They're going to they're hitting the hardest part of their SEC slate now, and you're going to see them start losing more games than they win because it's just going to be natural regression. Like they punched above their weight class all season long, and in the non-con, it hasn't exactly been, you know, a murderer's row of teams they've played. Really, the best team in terms of RPI ranking that they played in the non-conference schedule was a neutral site game against Kansas.
Right.
Or I guess, and then I forget about Louisville too, because it was
they play Louisville.
They play Louisville. Well, actually, Louisville's 76 RPI. Kansas,
they're having
64.
a bad year. Yeah, Louisville's, that's interesting.
Not a normal Louisville.
Yeah,
year.
it's not at all. I'm not sure it's kind of like LSU season, like Louisville. Like it's just sometimes you have a bad year.
Happens.
For what it's worth, to kind of go to your point, South Carolina is number 4 in the strength of schedule category.
Very
Kentucky is 15th. Tennessee is 29th. Again, you'll see Tennessee and Knoxville later. East Carolina's strength of schedule. I said they want to make them a host, but a super regional host, a top 8. ECU 50. The committee has to look at all of these types of things. Who did you play? And South Carolina's scheduled up. Again, you had the series with Clemson. I know you didn't win either of those games, and the third one could not be made up for logistical reasons. You did beat North Carolina. You've got to make those things count for you. So that's why I say I know Carolina fans don't want to hear it, but you'd like for Clemson and North Carolina to continue playing good baseball because it helps you.
Be in the top 10 in RPI.
It helps you. But Carolina's strength of schedule at number 4 is going to be something. And again, 24 quad 1 game. By the time you're done with the regular season, plus then you get to add a couple, you hope, in the tournament, you're going to have more than 30 quad 1 games. And if you can split those, that's a nice feather in your cap.
Not just 30 quad 1 games, Jay, but as to the math right here, you'll have, as the current RPI, once the season's over, regular season's over, South Carolina will have played 18 games against teams in the top 10 of RPI.
It's impressive.
18 games. There are teams that are in the top 30 of RPI that have not played 18 quad 1 games. Like I said, it's not just quad 1 games you're playing. You are playing them against the best teams in the entire country. So to be 29-14 and to have the resume you have, we can talk about specific concerns, whether it be something with the lineup or with pitching, establishing pitching roles still. There's still some fair questions to have, but when you look at just the resume for a team that's dropped 14 games, you are in incredible position right now to be able to host.
The 2 best Big 12 schools, for what it's worth, because it's a great baseball league, but this year just a little off. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State at number 18 and 20 in the RPI. Again, the ACC is loaded. I certainly feel like Oregon State is going to get a hosting spot. But will Santa Barbara? Will Dallas Baptist? Those are some of the other teams in the top 20 right now. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Again, 16 schools, and they may not all be right now in that top 20. And things are still fluid enough to be able to change. But for those of you wondering, Carolina's in good shape. They're not in great shape, but they're in very good shape to be a first-round host. And, again, that's one of the minimum expectations. We'll get you what is going on tonight across the SEC in baseball, and we will recap the numbers from the schools of the SEC and the NFL draft. It led the way once again in the NFL. And I almost got fooled. I'll tell you about that, too, because it wasn't my fault. I'll put it that way. Drive around the SEC coming up next.
From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to report to you that are causing some delays on the roadways this afternoon, and we have a lot of them, most of them here in Richland County. We'll start with one on Bluff Road and Highway 48 near Idlewild Boulevard. Got another one on Farrah Road near Highway 555 and Hardin Street. Another accident on Green Lawn Drive near Trinity Drive. Also have one on Highway 1 at Augusta Road near Fontaine Road. Still here in Richland County, we have one on I-26 westbound at the Columbia Avenue exit 91, or at least it is a disabled vehicle that's causing some delay. An accident on I-77 northbound at Leesburg Road and exit 9B, and in Lexington County, we have one on I-20 westbound at South Carolina 6 near exit 55.
It is Drive Around the SEC time. Welcome back in. Jay Phillips, Elijah Campbell with you. Got a little bit of breaking news for you with Gamecock football, so I will start with that. Learning more about this young man as we speak. South Carolina has gotten a commitment today through the portal from wide receiver Vandrevius Jacobs, a freshman from Florida State, grew up in Fort Pierce, Florida. Really not anything to tell you about from last season. Couldn't crack the lineup, I suppose, on what was a very good team, obviously. Last year, he had, don't know how many games he played in. I'm looking that up right now. He played in 3. Okay, he played in 3 games last year, and he caught 3 passes for 60 yards, 1 touchdown in a game against Southern Mississippi in September. Did not see action again until the game at Pittsburgh, and then a game with, was that North Alabama? North Alabama, Northern Arizona. Why not?
There are only a handful of
I don't know
states
UNA.
with
I don't know.
Northern Alaska.
I don't know what UNA is. I'll be honest with you. Sorry. Had 1 catch in each of those games. Against Southern Miss, 1 catch for 13 yards, and that was a touchdown pass. At Pittsburgh, 1 catch for 19 yards in a 24-7 win. And against Northern Alabama, 1 catch for 28 yards. So that was it. He is 6 feet tall.
Explosive plays.
175 pounds. He will have 3 years of eligibility left. And he may have more. I guess it may be with only 3 games and limited action. I'm not sure where that line is drawn anymore. But anyway, our buddy Chris Clark says that's a good pickup for South Carolina. You need some more bodies there. Now, this is not me being critical. They're going after who they go after. We were told they really wanted that jump ball guy, more like the 6'3", 6'4" type, or something like that. And somebody that can body up a little bit. 6 foot 175 is not necessarily, say, 6'3", 200.
He's not Alshon Jeffrey. He's
not, and you're not going to go get an Alshon Jeffrey in this portal or a Sidney Wright. I mean, and let's face it, there are very few Alshon Jeffreys out there. But
that's why they're hard to acquire.
Yeah, that's why everybody wanted him.
Yeah, exactly. He's a 3-star prospect out of high school. Vandrevius Jacobs, not Alshon Jeffrey.
Right.
So there was some type of recruiting hype around him.
Yeah,
maybe that's not to be that, but
so. And apparently they're still active. There's only a few days. I mean, maybe even tomorrow, right? I mean, this portal window is short.
Mm-hmm. Very short.
So it may well be that by tomorrow this thing wraps up. I want to say it's 15 days, and I think it opened on tax day.
Mm-hmm. And we could have a framework for a roster.
Yeah.
Finally.
So once again, breaking news via our good friend Chris Clark. Vandrevius Jacobs, wide receiver, Florida State, Fort Pierce, Florida, 6 foot, 175, 3 catches and a touchdown in his freshman season for the undefeated, at least until they went to their bowl game, Knowles.
I was going to ask, did he play in the vaunted bowl game?
Did not play in the bowl game.
So he's a survivor. He survived the manhandle well south of the panhandle.
That was not pretty. It wasn't going to be pretty anyway. But anyway, all right, we move on. Baseball tonight across the Southeastern Conference. Florida needs all the wins and help they can get. They have FAU in Gainesville just underway. No score. Lipscomb is at Tennessee tonight. Georgia visits Kennesaw State. That game starts at 6. A&M hosts Tarleton State with a T. Missouri hosts
Billy Gillespie.
Lindenwood. That sounds like a golf course.
It does. I've always
or like a nice resort somewhere in the hills. Come spend your weekend at Lindenwood.
Would you like to guess the conference they're in?
Is that like a Missouri Valley Conference?
It's a Valley Conference.
Ohio Valley?
The Ohio Valley.
There we go.
What they have done, what football has done.
Which one is the Valley?
Oh, that's Missouri.
Okay.
Yeah. The one that has Arch Madness.
Yeah,
they play it in St. Louis.
I see what you did there.
For their conference tournament.
Yeah.
The OVC is a shell of itself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Missouri Valley is on the rise. And as an OVC lover at heart, it's a shame to see schools like Lindenwood and Southern Indiana take the place of what, Murray State and Austin Peay used to hold.
Yeah.
One of America's finest mid-major conferences.
Where, if I may ask, is Lindenwood? Is it university or college? Do you know?
That's a really good question. I have no bleeping idea, actually, and I know a lot of these, and I could not tell you where Lindenwood is on a map. Couldn't point it out. Couldn't tell you what state it's in.
I'm going to say I've not heard. I mean, I do this for a living, and primarily it's college. I've not heard of Lindenwood. That's why I said it sounds like a golf course or some nice resort.
It used to be the nicest D2 resort on the planet, and they brought into to D1. I can look it up.
They are not very good at baseball. I'll tell you that much. They're 14-29 and 7-12 in the Ohio Valley Conference, as you let me know. Tennessee Tech will be at Vanderbilt.
St. Charles, Missouri.
St. Charles, Missouri. Is that on the river?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Tennessee Tech at Vandy. Grambling at LSU. Missouri State at Arkansas. Those are tonight's games across the Southeastern Conference. The SEC, as we continue our drive around the league, brought to you by Herndon Chevy, had 59 players taken. So this morning, I'm looking it up. And I'm at CBS Sports, and they cover the NFL pretty tightly. They have games. Right?
One or two.
Yeah, a few. And I'm like, I'm counting, I'm looking, and I was like, all right, well, you figure, like Georgia and Alabama are going to lead the way, and they did. And I went through they went by their, by school draft. They had the by conference, and then they had the by school. And I counted 12, and I was like, oh, I figure Vandy. And then I'll tell you which one. I was like, wait. So I counted again, and I was like, no, that's 12. And I was like really fooling myself, like thinking, Jay, are you getting old and senile or something? Like, can you not count to 13? And so I counted a third time, man. And I was like, no, that's 12. And so then I was like, what school isn't there? And it was Florida. Because Florida only had one with Pearsall at the 31st pick of the first round. And you and I were talking. I was playing like a guessing game with Elijah. I was like, hey, 2 schools didn't have draft picks. I was like, one of them's Vandy. You know that this year.
Free space on the bingo card.
But what's the other one? And so Elijah's like, well, not so-and-so. And then you went, well, and Florida had the one. And I was like, wait a second. They did, but they only had the one. For whatever reason, CBS Sports just decided that pick didn't happen.
They did not count Ricky Pearsall as a person.
They didn't. So sorry, Ricky, but he did get picked. But anyway, here's how it broke down for you. Alabama had 10.
Shocker.
Georgia had 8. Missouri and LSU had 6. Missouri.
That's how you end up winning 11 games.
Yeah. You got to have talent, man.
To win games.
There's the correlation. You want to get better?
Direct correlation.
More good players. That's my favorite slogan on this show, if you've not yet learned that.
Start making T-shirts.
Yeah, well, I probably should. More good players. Auburn had 5. Carolina, Kentucky, and A&M had 4 apiece. State, Ole Miss, and Tennessee had 3. Arkansas had 2. And Florida did indeed have the 1. Sorry, Vanderbilt, you did not. Tennessee was only 3.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Only 3 this year.
Interesting.
Was not a highly touted roster in terms of draft-eligible players.
Yeah.
They still won 8 games, which for them should be a victory lap.
I suppose so. But and I was a little surprised that Georgia only had 8 to Bama's 10.
The fact they didn't have the most, and they're arguably the best team in the sport all year.
Should we? Well, maybe because so many of them are coming back.
That's also true. And that's scary.
Yeah.
It's very scary, including the quarterback.
Yeah. He's good.
Who might be the number 1 pick next year.
He's going to be the number 1 pick next year, right? That's my early guess.
I saw some sports books that had Shedeur Sanders as the highest or the best, having the best odds to be the number 1 overall pick next year. And I'm like, that's a waste of money. If you, in April of 2024, put money on Shedeur Sanders to be the first overall pick in the NFL draft in 2025, you have a problem. That's how you know. That's where the intervention needs to happen, right then and there.
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see what others do. And I realize that his father is an NFL expert and all that kind of stuff. But I just don't see. And they didn't even make a bowl game last year.
They're bad. Bad football team.
So
we're good for 2 weeks.
That's the drive around the SEC, brought to you by Herndon Chevy. Listen, you can save $20,000 on new Silverados at Herndon. And together, let's drive. Elijah's going to quiz me right after this. Welcome back in. Final few minutes of the postgame show on this Tuesday. Do want to remind you that the craft beer card is back. You can spend $30 per brewery at 12 different craft beer locations all across the Midlands. That's a $360 value. That's 30 times 12. See, math, I can do it. And the card only costs you $79. Go to 1075thegame.com, click on Sweet Deals, and learn more. Earlier, we had the big story out there for you today that South Carolina is number one in the SEC when it comes to proximity of its football stadium to Waffle House at just 0.2 miles, with Alabama second at 0.4 and Georgia third at 0.6. A&M last at 69 miles away.
Nice.
That ain't walking distance, man.
It's not. Nor is it running distance.
Yeah, you just so
Or driving distance.
You know, what's the equivalent of Waffle House? They have like at least Huddle House out that way?
I would guess, but
Because Huddle House and Waffle House are almost the same. The difference, obviously, you know what? At Huddle House, you can get pancakes. Other than that, I'm really serious. Like, you can get pancakes at Huddle House.
the only difference.
You can't get them at Waffle House. And before I have Elijah quiz me, our buddy Tim Frisbee hit me. Of course, Pops played for Carolina back in the day. He said, Coach Spurrier didn't like that Bojangles that used to be 500 feet from Willie B. He banned us from Bojangles and Bernie's.
Wow.
Quote, too much brown stuff. Well, the Bojangles is now a little farther away. And Bernie's is still down Bluff Road. Bernie's Chicken, top 3 chicken spot in Columbia, South Carolina. Bernie's Chicken
Ever
is...
been?
Oh, you need to go, dude. Bernie's Chicken, fire.
Might go tonight.
That's what the kids say.
That is what the kids say.
Fire. I have kids.
You have kids, you hear them speak.
That's right. So thank you, Pops. Yeah, Coach didn't like that. I get it. Not during football season. You need to try to eat a little healthier.
Limit the fried chicken, sure.
But as Raymond's mom says on Everybody Loves Raymond, what is better for you than the foods you love?
That's a good point.
Huh?
That's a good point.
So
Now I want to steal
I've
it.
always remembered that one. All right. Years ago, our good friend Pearson Fowler, when he was with me, just made up a name of an NBA player. His name was Pascal Siakam. He just made up sounds and said, that's who is the second best player, because I didn't know. I was like, Kawhi Leonard now plays for Toronto. Who's the second best player on the team? And Pearson said, Pascal Siakam. And I was like, no. I was like, give me an actual player. He's like, no, he's really good. I was like, no, okay. I learned that Pascal Siakam was actually a person who was a very good NBA player. But today you said another name. I can't remember who.
Josh Okogie.
Yeah, and I said you're just making up another name to try and say that the Phoenix Suns have people other than the top 3 they have. But apparently that is a real player. And then you said Austin Reeves, and I was like, I know he's a real player. So now I'm going to be quizzed on whether I'll let you set this up.
That's right. Now, welcome to the first ever edition of Real NBA Player or a creation of Elijah Campbell's imagination. I'll name 6 names, and Jay, you're going to tell me if this is a real NBA basketball player or a creation of my imagination. We're going to start. Number 1, Dazana Diop.
Yes, real player.
All right, you're 1 for 1. So far, so good.
Not just sounds.
Former Dallas Mavericks backup center.
Okay.
Number 2, Rocco Wallace.
Oh, see, that sounds like it could be real, but now I think that you've made that up. But Rocco, yes, NBA player.
No, Rocco Wallace is a creation of my imagination.
Darn.
1 for 1.
All right.
Or,
One out of 2.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, 1 out of 2.
All right.
Number 3, Hassan Rashard.
Yeah, that's a real player.
It is not. That is a created player.
It sounds like
From my
somebody.
brain.
It sounds like somebody.
Not real.
All right.
Hassan Rashard
Dang it.
doesn't exist.
Well, if this is baseball, I'm still doing okay.
But it's not baseball.
Yeah, I know.
Now, number 4, Alperen Sengun.
Oh, jeez. You know what? Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, I got
All
one.
right.
Wait, what's that one again?
That is 2, Alperen Sengun. He was a finalist for Most Improved Player center for the Houston Rockets. He's a baby, Nikola Jokic. He can play.
Okay.
Turkish national.
Wow.
Number 5, Bilal Koulibaly.
I know there's a lot of Koulibalys that play soccer because that's a popular last name in Africa. No.
Incorrect. That was the Washington Wizards' top 10 draft pick last season. Bilal Coulibaly, definitely real. All right, last chance.
All right.
Domantas Milosevic.
Again, sounds so plausible. Yes, NBA player.
Domantas Milosevic is not an NBA player. That is a fake created Lithuanian basketball player that I made up about 20 minutes ago.
So I was just 2 for 6.
2 for 6 on your first ever edition of NBA player.
Who's the guy for Houston?
Player. Alperen Sengun.
All right, I'm going to have to follow him now. That's
He can
the one.
play.
That's the one that seemed the most unlikely.
And he's good.
That you just made up sounds and said, here we go. That was fun. Thanks to Derek Scott. Thanks to Mike Uva. Tomorrow on the program, our buddy Josh Kendall of The Athletic. We'll quiz him on some names, perhaps. We'll see you then.